All right, Braves fans, let's get rolling. I'm George McNair, and this is State of the Braves. Well, guys, we'll start with uh, being thankful. All is right with the world. The Phillies will not win the World Series this year. They've been knocked out. No, yes, they were knocked out by the Mets. So us Braves fans definitely a little, a little torn by that whole situation. The Mets are still going. How are the Mets still going, and the Braves weren't? But here we are, okay, and the Braves are home. The Phillies are home. I'm hoping that the Mets will be home soon as well. But it's been a crazy year, and I'm honestly take a little solace in the fact that the Phillies have now experienced what the Braves experienced last 2 years. Right, the Phillies had the awkward 5 days off. They looked a little sluggish too. They obviously didn't play their best, and now they're going home, going up against a fired up upstart wild card team with crazy fans as well. So it happened to the Phillies. Phillies fans can go home crying, just like us Braves fans have the last 2 years. We can save talking about this, what I think is a really dumb playoff format that baseball has created. We can save that for another day. But yeah, here we are, and the Braves have gone home. They went home earlier than the Mets or the Phillies, so we have to kind of figure out what happened there. And of course, injuries is a huge part of that. Every time you bring up the 2024 season, you talk about the injuries, but we have to get beyond the injuries. And I think it's a big danger to just blame everything on the injuries. So one of the biggest letdowns beyond the injuries for the Braves in 2024 was the regression in performance by the Braves infield. And so I really do want to focus with this episode on the Braves infield. What happened? What should the Braves do moving forward to possibly improve the performance of this group, or maybe change some members of this group? The numbers really are stark between when you compare 2023, which went so well, especially for the infield, and 2024. So what I want to do is just read some basic stats to you guys. Is going to become very obvious. Every single one of these guys regressed this year. Don't forget that every member of the 2023 Braves infield made the All-Star team last year. Just remarkable, right? And none of them, of course, made the All-Star team this year. They didn't deserve to make the All-Star team this year. So let's go to it. We'll start with Matt Olson, okay? His 2023 numbers: 283 average, a 389 on base percentage, an amazing 604 slugging percentage, and that was good for a 161 WRC plus. Matt Olson in 2024 down to 247 with a 333 on base percentage and a 457 slugging percentage. So he went from an over 600 slug to a mid 400s slug, 457, right? Huge reduction. And that was good for a 117 WRC plus. Okay, yeah, we know Matt Olson, his struggles. I'll go through some of these guys a little bit more in detail as we go. Let's move on to Ozzie Albies. In 2023, he hit 280 with a 336 on base percentage and a 518 slugging percentage, a 125 WRC plus. Honestly, guys, I think this is like max Matt Olson, and I think it might be max Ozzie Albies in terms of his performance, unless he kind of turns around his left-handed swing a little bit more than maybe I think he can. But he had a great season in 2023, 4.1 WAR season. Ozzie this year, yeah, I know there was a lot of injuries in here, but when he was on the field, he just wasn't the same guy. He hit 251 with just a 303 on base percentage, barely over 300, and just a 404 slugging percentage. Just really reduced power, reduced everything. He had a 95 WRC plus. That's right. Ozzie Albies this year was a sub-average hitter. Just a reminder, WRC plus 100 is average. So Ozzie Albies was a sub 100 WRC plus this year, and that was good for just a 1.3 WAR season from Ozzie. All right, Orlando Arcia is again maybe max Orlando Arcia in 2023. He hit 264 with a 321 on base percentage and a 420 slugging percentage. That was good for exactly a 100 WRC plus season. And again, he's never been a league average hitter. So getting to league average was pretty darn good for him. It was good for a 2.4 WAR season. I mean, again, two WAR season is like your average major league starter, and he got over that. So who would be complaining about what Arcia did last year? A surprising all-star. This year, it all went downhill. 218 average, 271 on base percentage. Yes, well under 300 on base percentage, and just a 354 slugging percentage. No slug from Orlando Arcia, even with 17 home runs. No slug. That was good for a 72 WRC plus. Austin Riley in 2023, he was one of the few guys in 2023 who didn't really have a career year. Actually, I think 2022 was a little better for Riley overall, but still, in 2023, Austin Riley hit 281 with a 345 on base percentage and a 516 slugging percentage, good for a 128 WRC plus. In 2024, he hit 256, 322 on base, and a 461 slugging percentage. That's good for a 116 WRC plus. Now, we know that Riley was definitely trending upward and honestly had played really great for about 2 months before he broke his hand. So I'm willing to bet that he might have closed the gap on those numbers even more. And he still is, as he's closer to his 2023 numbers than anybody else on this list, but still lower than last season. All right, and then finally, Sean Murphy. In 2023, with that crazy hot first half that he had, he ended up with a 251 average, 345 on base, and a 478 slugging percentage, and that was good for a 130 WRC plus from him. And this year, as you guys know, it was ugly, really ugly. 193 average, a 284 on base percentage, and that was good for a 352 slugging percentage, and a 78 WRC plus. So Arcia and Murphy were both, and Albies were all sub 100 WRC plus hitters. They were all below average league hitters, and Arcia and Murphy, by a long shot, they were below league average. Murphy, by the way, also his defensive metrics dropped. He was still good defensively by the metrics, and defensive metrics are notably kind of not entirely reliable, but by the metrics, he wasn't as good defensively either this year. So Murphy certainly had a very, very down year. It started terribly for him with the oblique injury and all that, but man, when he was on the field, he was not good. So every player on the Braves infield had a worse season this year in every offensive category. Literally every offensive category that I shared with you got worse from one year to the next. And again, even when healthy, their performance was down. So you can blame some stuff on injury. We never know how much, injuries are nagging. They might be on the field and they're still hurting. They're still injured in some way. So, you give them a little bit there, a little grace, but ultimately, right, you are measured by what you do on the field. And this group, everybody came up short from what they did in 2023. Now, if they all came up slightly short, it's different, right? Because that's still a great year all around. But they pretty much all, outside of Riley, came up really, really short from what they did last year. So when it comes down to overall value, when you're talking about WAR, this is from Fangraphs. Amazingly, in 2023, this group of 5 guys was good for 23 total FWAR. 23, that is insane. But this group this year had an abysmal 7.9 total FWAR. 5 guys, 5 guys, 2 of who are, potentially perennial MVP candidates in Olson and Riley. They should be able to do 7.9 combined together. I mean, Olson by himself almost got to 7.9 last year. So for 5 guys that you are relying on, you are counting on to only get to 7.9 total FWAR, I mean, it is amazing that the Braves were able to make the playoffs with that. It's honestly amazing. That is just over 1/3 of the total value that they contributed in 2023. No player even managed to earn half of their WAR value from 2023 this season. Again, Riley was the closest to getting his 2023 numbers. He was on a tear. Maybe he gets close to that if he doesn't get injured, but we'll never know on that one. I'm not going to spend a ton of time on Olson or Riley today, but I do want to just talk about them briefly. Olson and Riley are both with the Braves for the long haul. I'm really not concerned about Riley. While he is prone to slumps, he almost always goes through one prolonged slump every year, but he's also proven time and time again to be able to get out of it. So I think he's kind of proven himself in that way. I certainly wish the slumps didn't happen, but at least he's proven his way to get out of it. I'm a little more concerned about Matt Olson. When he goes into slumps, it's like he gets a little more lost with his swing. He's not really able to correct his batting mechanics on his own. And it's almost like the Braves coaches don't even understand his batting mechanics. So he hasn't been able to figure things out quickly at all. I don't think he ever fully corrected his swing and stance issues this season. He just started choking up, and he got better in the last month, but he still didn't look like the player that he was at any point. He never looked like the player he was in 2023. So that is concerning to me. What Matt Olson are we going to get next season? I have no idea. I really don't. Ozzie, Ozzie is Ozzie. I mean, I think he's actually a very consistent player when he's healthy. But guys, he has not been healthy at all in 2 of the last 3 seasons. He's just been really often injured. He's got to stay healthy. He's got to stay on the field. So that's the inconsistency with Ozzie, is just he's honestly injury prone. And I do wonder, with his contract up after 2027, if his Braves tenure might end at that point if he continues to battle injuries. I know the Braves love him. Everybody loves Ozzie. He's a flawed player, but he's a talented player. He's a talented, especially offensive player, but he's got to stay healthy. He is the heart of the team, but if you're not on the field, you can't really impact the team very much. All right, so those are those 3 guys. I would expect all of them to bounce back and have better years next year if they're healthy, and I really hope they will be. But I want to focus most of this episode, and it's probably not shocking, but most of this episode on Sean Murphy and Orlando Arcia. They were just huge weak spots in the lineup pretty much all season, and really extending into the second half of last year, right? Both of them had pretty bad back ends of 2023 as well. So this is a year and a half of pretty bad performance at the plate from both of them. So let's start with Sean Murphy. I don't want to totally rehash the Murphy-William Contreras decision, trade, all that Anthopoulos made. I mean, it certainly appears at this point that was a mistake of a trade. I didn't like the trade at the time. I really liked William Contreras. I had seen Contreras play in low A ball in Danville, Virginia back in the day. So I felt like a connection. I wanted him to be a Brave for a long time. And, he certainly was a very good offensive player in his early Braves career. So, yeah, I didn't want to see him go. And, of course, the trade on its merits was a little weird. It wasn't terrible in the moment, but it was just like, why are you trading a young, controllable, cheap catcher who's really talented offensively and not terrible defensively? Looks like he's improving for a catcher who is defense first. He's got power, right? But kind of a pure power bat with superior defensive skills. So it looked at the moment, okay, maybe this is, you're just trading one superior skill for another one, and it's pretty even. It's kind of a wash. Instead, of course, how it's played out over the last 2 years, especially last year and a half, Contreras seems to be the better player, right? Contreras has continued to hit at a high level while also becoming a very solid defensive catcher. Clearly, that was the issue that the Braves weren't sold on from Contreras. He's earned 2 straight seasons of over 5 WAR. He's been a very, very good catcher, maybe even the best catcher in the National League over the last 2 years. That's the guy the Braves gave up. While Murphy's offense has totally cratered, and unfortunately his defensive metrics have taken a slight step back this year too. I already mentioned that. Murphy's defensive metrics compared to Contreras's was almost identical this year. So that's kind of depressing to think about, right? Now they might have different defensive strengths, but still they grade out just about the same overall. So Contreras was about 4.5 WAR better than Murphy this year, right? It just wasn't even close in terms of the kinds of production, especially offense production, the Brewers got from Contreras compared to what the Braves got from Murphy. And imagine what the Braves could have done with Contreras' bat, how they could have leaned on him with all the other injuries this year. It sure would have been nice to have that kind of bat in the Braves lineup this year. So Murphy's oblique injury on the first day of the season, certainly this played a part in his poor performance this year. But again, it's hard to know. It's hard to put a number on that. What would he have done if he'd been healthy all year? Well, it's a total unknown. I do think when the Braves acquired Murphy, they planned to play him kind of 60-40 with d'Arnaud, that kind of split. But Murphy simply has not performed well enough through most of this time to maintain that kind of playing time. It's kind of a catch-22. He may need more playing time in order to perform better and more consistently at the plate. But how do you give him more at-bats when he's performing so poorly? I mean, he's not even hitting 200. In the first half of 2023, he got a lot of at-bats. Remember, d'Arnaud went out with a concussion, and the Braves really had to lean heavily on Murphy, and he performed great. But he also wore down in the second half because of that. So it's kind of weird. It's almost like the Braves have chosen to go with this catching tandem, but both of them are too good to split 50-50 playing time. I also don't love that the Braves almost do like a every other day kind of situation where, d'Arnaud plays one day, Murphy plays the next. There's zero chance for either guy to offensively have any kind of flow when you might even have a good offensive night and then you sit the next day. Also, I don't know what the benefit of that is, even in terms of rest and recovery. You get one day off, you play the next, one day off, play the next. I'd rather play for 3 days and then take 3 days off and fully recover and then play 3 more. At least you get 3 days in a row to play and maybe get your back going. So I don't love how they use these guys. I do think that's probably part of the situation, the performance issues with Murphy, but that's just one piece of it, right? So the Braves are in a really tricky spot with Sean Murphy. They've given him this pretty big extension that's going to go for 4 more years at least. If you hold on to him and give him another year to prove it and turn things around, yeah, he might bounce back and have a great season. That would be awesome. But what if he continues to struggle and he has another season just like he did with this one? It could totally kill his trade value, and you're kind of stuck with this albatross of a contract for 3 more years. So right now, Murphy's contract, he has 4 years left at just over $12 million per year. He has a club option for a 5th year. So, that's a lot. But I think he is movable right now, even though he had this terrible year. He's shown in the past he's been a good player, and most of the major leagues is catcher poor. So all that being said, right, there's Murphy's contract. What would I do with the catching situation? I've mentioned this, I think, even in the last podcast. I would trade Murphy now while he still has some value on the trade market. I would go with a combination of Travis d'Arnaud and Drake Baldwin. Drake Baldwin, he hadn't played one day in the major leagues yet. So, yes, this is a bit of a gamble, but it's only somewhat of a gamble. You have Travis d'Arnaud. You know how good of a player he is. And he's getting older. He's going to be 36 next year. But if you have to play 50-50 with him and Baldwin, or even 60-40 with him and Baldwin, with Travis playing more games, I think you can do that. I would, you know, Darno's not going to play much longer. I think you do have to think longer term about the future, and you have to determine if Murphy really is your catcher for the next 4 years or 5 years, or if he's not. And if he's not, then I think Drake Baldwin is the next man up. And I really like what Drake Baldwin has to offer, again, even though he hasn't proven it at the major league level yet. So there are some teams out there that are certainly catching poor and probably would love and still offer a good bit for Sean Murphy. He's not going to be as valuable as he would have been, the end of 2023. He's killed some of that value, but he is still movable. Again, Travis is still giving you solid value, but Baldwin is probably the better hitter and also grades pretty well defensively from what I understand. So I think it would be a potential improvement. Now, all this is about, what do you believe Murphy is? Is Murphy what he was in the first half of 2023, or was that kind of a flash in the pan? Is he somewhere in between? It's just really hard to judge him. What do I expect the Braves to do with the catching situation? I honestly expect them to run it back with Travis and Sean Murphy. If they do this, I really hope they don't trade Baldwin in some kind of, swap for somebody else, whether for injury, or Travis possibly retiring after 2025. It's possible. Or maybe Murphy's bat doesn't come back, right? I think having Baldwin waiting in the wings is for one more year is really important. Baldwin is a great safety valve for a really important position. So if Murphy does bounce back, okay, then you can trade Baldwin. You kind of feel much better about the whole situation there. So what does Baldwin bring offensively? If you haven't really dove into who is Drake Baldwin, he just this past year, he made it all the way up to AAA. Throughout all the minors last year, he hit .276 with a .370 on-base percentage, which is excellent, and a .423 slug. He's not quite the power guy that Murphy would be, but he is definitely still capable of hitting some home runs and some doubles and that sort of thing. Only a 17% strikeout rate, which is really good. And again, with that high on-base percentage, he walks a good bit. I think he's just overall going to be able to contribute in a more consistent way offensively. And again, if he proves it defensively as well, that's a very valuable player to have. So it may be legitimate that Baldwin still needs some time to develop, maybe in terms of calling a game, and all the intricacies of what it takes to be a major league catcher. But his offensive game, I think, really could be a big upgrade from what the Braves have been getting with this, timeshare situation with d'Arnaud and Murphy. It worked great. It seemed to work great in 2023, but man, it did not work very well at all this year. All right, let's move on to Orlando Arcia. Murphy only managed a 0.8 WAR season this year, but he only played 72 games because of injury. Arcia managed a 0.8 WAR season in 157 games. There's like zero value that Arcia was giving the Braves overall, right, from a game-to-game standpoint. No Brave was as consistently bad offensively as Orlando Arcia was. Yes, he provided some defensive value. Okay, that was really all he did. He provided a pretty stable situation at shortstop, a premium position. But isn't that what almost any starting shortstop in the major leagues is going to do, right? If you're a major league shortstop, you're going to be at least a solid defender. I mean, there are some, some others that maybe aren't, but maybe they are excellent offensively, right? And bring that kind of value. But for the most part, major league shortstops are going to bring some defense. All right, so before the season began, I expected, and I said this, I'm on record of saying that I expected Arcia to come back to earth from what seemed like 2023, an outlier kind of season. He hit 300 for half the year. He cratered the second half of the year. He only hit about 210 after the All-Star break last year. And I told you guys, that's Orlando Arcia. That's more of what I think he is. And he certainly proved that out this year. Arcia was, guys, this is just, it kind of hurts my heart to even say this. Arcia was the last among shortstops in all of baseball. He was the last in average. He was the last in on-base percentage. He was the last in slugging percentage, and he was the last in WRC plus among all qualifying shortstops. Okay, among all qualifying, basically that means starting shortstops, last in every single offensive category that I mentioned. It's undeniable that he was the worst starting shortstop in baseball last year. And he was playing for an Atlanta Braves team that was trying to win a World Series. And of course, all of that was totally exposed when many of the Braves' best players go down. And now you're batting Orlando Arcia fifth in the lineup. Again, how did this team make the playoffs? So I think Arcia was always going to be the backup plan. I think when he signed his contract for about $2.5 million a year, I think the Braves wanted Vaughn Grissom to take that shortstop position and roll with it. And obviously he wasn't able to do that. Wish the best for him still, but he's kind of struggled at the major league level since that point. And so the Braves give the job to Arcia, and to his credit, he has a career year in 2023, and it kind of looked like, okay, maybe we got something here, especially for a guy on a really cheap contract. But since then, it just simply hasn't been good at all. All right, guys, so hopefully I've made a pretty good case to you by now that Arcia was not very good. Maybe I didn't need to make the case at all. I mean, I think you could see it with your own eyes. But, yeah, look, Arcia, on top of all the stuff, baseball related. I personally don't love Arcia's goofy antics. He's just not my favorite player. Generally, I don't know that he has really endeared himself to a lot of Braves fans. I mean, it's not anything terrible, and I hear he's a great guy in the clubhouse. People love him. His teammates love him. But, from the Bryce Harper incident and how he just kind of shrunk in that moment in the last playoffs to his hugging Machado in game 2 after, in this playoffs, Machado hits the go-ahead double, and Arcia is like just laughing and hugging with him where it looks like the Braves are about to get bounced from the playoffs. These are not capital offenses, but it's just something that I don't love. And it's safe to say that Arcia might at least be missing a killer instinct that you would like your players to have. So it's not the reason I say get rid of him, but it's just another ding in his resume as far as the Braves are concerned or should be concerned. So Arcia's defense, yeah, it's solid. He's making almost no money. So he's been a decent value for the Braves. But for a team that is always thinking about a World Series, you just need more, right? You just need a better player starting at shortstop. It's just the facts. And especially more in terms of big at bats, right? Not a guy with zero plate discipline and no plan at the plate. So shortstop is the most obvious position I think the Braves can improve this offseason. Catcher, I think if you were to move Murphy, it would be a fairly bold move at this point. I know Anthopoulos doesn't like moving guys that he's given, pretty long extensions to, but so I'm not necessarily expecting that one. It's what I would do, but the Arcia one to me is the most obvious. I would say to Braves fans, don't expect a free agent acquisition, a big free agent acquisition. You got Willie Adames is probably going to get overpaid this year, kind of like a Dansby Swanson. You got Ha-Seong Kim, might be a little more realistic for the Braves, but he's also potentially going to get a pretty big deal. He's a little more defense first, but he's also, I mean, I like him actually a lot for the Braves. If they went and got him, he's more of a higher average, higher on base guy. Not crazy in terms of power, but he's an excellent defender. But I'm not expecting the Braves to go out into the free agent market and go sign a shortstop. So are there some trade possibilities out there? I mean, there's two names I'll throw out now. I'll certainly dive more into this as the offseason goes. But Ezekiel Tovar with the Colorado Rockies and Xavier Edwards with the Miami Marlins are two guys that I think the Braves could target. They're both young. Tovar he's got a 95 WRC plus. He's 23 years old. He's a superior defender. He's better than Arcia by all the metrics. He rated fifth best in major leagues this year. And he's got some real pop. Now, he is coming from Colorado, so maybe some of that would revert back if you got him. But a lot of swing and miss, too. So I don't love that, right? I would like the Braves to bring in some guys that aren't going to, add to the high strikeout totals. But he's got a pretty similar profile, actually, to Willy Adames. 95 WRC plus last year. So, he wasn't great, but he's young and he's got a lot of potential to be great. And again, his defense is excellent. So you certainly, not only would you not lose anything defensively with Tovar, you would add a little bit too. The other guy I mentioned, Xavier Edwards, he came up just this year with the Marlins, played excellent, 128 WRC plus. And this is a guy with not much power at all. This guy is a speedster. Late in the year, he had a three triple game. He's 25 years old, but he hit in 70 games. He hit 328 with a 397 on base percentage. He did have a really high batted balls in play profile, but actually, if you look through his entire minor league career, he's always carried a really high batted balls in play profile, probably because of his speed. So I like this guy a lot. Speedster, gets on base, high on base percentage, tons of stolen bases, right? You would add that back into your team. 31 steals in just 70 games last year. He is a downgrade defensively. He's not a great defender at shortstop. So you would have to eat that, and maybe you could improve that a little bit over time. But I love adding a guy with more speed and a totally different skill set to this lineup. Again, can you get either of these guys? I don't know. I'm just throwing their names out there. They're young. They would probably be pretty expensive. I would say that both of these teams could use a catcher. So if you're trying to do a 1-for-1 swap of Sean Murphy and one of these guys, I don't know. Maybe it's possible. All that being said, it's early in the offseason, so I'm just throwing out names right now of guys that would certainly be improvements over Arcia. But yeah, both these teams are weak at catcher. Potential good trade partners, the Marlins and the Rockies, as they're probably trying to get better and maybe more so trying to build up their farm systems even more. As teams that are rebuilding, are they likely to trade away young, controllable guys like this? No, they would probably ask a lot for them, so it might be tough to get them. I'm also of the opinion that the Braves may not be married to Jorge Soler or Jared Kelenic for next year as starting outfielders. So, those two guys could also very much be part of trade packages. I'm going to talk about the outfield in my next episode, but those two guys I think could be, they have some value out there in the trade market. And I wouldn't be shocked if one or actually both of them would be included in a trade in the offseason, maybe for a shortstop. And I will also say the Braves are in a much better position to just generally deal some of their prospects, especially pitching prospects as well, right? You have Schwellenbach, his emergence. So the Braves have pitching depth to deal from. And that wasn't, I think, quite as much the case last year. All right, the last thing in terms of shortstop, if you can't trade for one, if you're not going to bring in a free agent, is internal options. Unfortunately, guys, the only guy internally that the Braves could turn to would be Nacho Alvarez. And the first question is he even a shortstop? He split his time at AAA between shortstop and third base. And we saw when he came up, he struggled. So is developmentally, is he even ready yet for the big leagues? I still like Nacho. He struggled mightily when they brought him up. I think he came up in a pretty unfair situation. The Braves really needed somebody. And he was, I think, just it was too early, right? I don't think he was ready to come up to the big leagues yet. I think he's still figuring out his approach at the plate. He's been very much a contact and high on base guy with not much power. He's in the middle of trying to tap into that power in AAA, and then he gets brought up, and he was striking out a lot. He was chasing balls outside of the zone, which was just totally not his profile in the minor league. So I still think Nacho is going to be a really good player. Maybe not an all-star or anything, but again, it's a question mark of can he be a shortstop at the major league level. He's a little thicker body build. He looks more like a third baseman or a second baseman. Doesn't mean he can't do it, but I just wonder. Um, and there's no other shortstop anywhere close within the organization that the Braves could go out and get. So, Alvarez, what if he comes into spring training and he just looks great? Maybe he could prove it and win that job. But I think that's not super likely at this point. Maybe in a year or two it would be. So, guys, the bottom line, right? Ozzie, Riley, Olson, they all need to be healthy and bounce back next year from disappointing seasons. But there's some obvious upgrades that this team could make at the shortstop position and potentially at the catcher position as well. If I had to bet, I think they address shortstop in the offseason as one of the higher priorities. It's one of the more obvious things that they need to do and they can do. And I think it's more likely that they roll back with the catchers, that they roll out those two guys again next year. Again, my preference is finding players at both of those positions that are capable of making consistent contact and putting together major league at bats while also providing you some solid defense at key defensive positions. I don't know if that's asking too much, but it was hard to watch this year with the struggles offensively of Orlando Arcia and Sean Murphy. So that's it, guys. I hope you enjoyed. Maybe not as much this season. It was a tough. 2024 was a tough one. Just be honest. But hopefully you enjoyed this episode and keep rooting for the Braves. And I am very interested to see how they bounce back, what they do in this off season. And again, I think it's going to start with the infield. So, all right, guys. Well, thanks for tuning in to another episode of Save the Braves. I'll talk to you soon.